I'm very pleased to be here today. You all are commercial realtors, so I want you to know that I am an SIOR. Boy, I was the one when I worked at UConn a long time ago, and then I left and came back, but I put the SIOR chapter at UConn so our students have a chance to become student members. I'm also an FRICS. That's kind of equivalent to the MAI, except it's the British one because I was in Europe for a good while. So I have a lot of industry experience. I'm not sure it's as good as yours because I think those people who are in the field usually know things better. It's always a pleasure to talk to realtors, professional realtors in the real estate community. I enjoy that. I'm one of those people who always say you hire a realtor, you hire an attorney, and you get an appraiser. And I do that. And all the properties I've owned commercially as well as privately, I do that because, you know, they keep you from making mistakes. And I think sometimes people forget that. Let me give you the key trends. Then I'll come back and go through some trends one by one. But any point you want to ask something, please jump in. And if Susie or Kim, if you see someone has a question and I don't see it, because right now the way the screen is set up, I have the PowerPoint and then I see a couple of faces, but I don't get the chat box. So if you all happen to see that, just put your hand up, interrupt me. I don't get offended. Remember, I'm normally teaching 60 students in a classroom, and so you have to be able to respond quickly to a hand. Okay, first, house prices are up. In Connecticut, we'll talk about that. One of the problems we have is inventory, and we need new houses. Some parts of the state, we have too many houses that don't fit the market. In other parts of the state, we need new construction, and it doesn't need to be $800,000, all right? Down the street from my condo in West Hartford, there's a new little subdivision. It's going to have about 20 houses. I think the cheap one is about 850,000, and the mean's about 1.2 million. I mean, it's great that we're getting those prices, but look, young couples 28 to 32, they just can't afford that. And so we need something in the market to help them out. Number two, COVID did nothing new. However, it did push some strong trends. I will tell you those trends. I'll tell you a couple of them that people didn't quite catch. They were already there, but COVID's going to push it harder. It is going to affect the commercial community, okay? And number three, people and jobs are moving to the South and the West. They're moving away from the city. That includes New York City, that includes Pittsburgh, Chicago, and they're moving away from taxes. Nearly all the key growth cities tend to be cities that have much lower taxes. Young people are not getting the starting salaries in real terms as we did when we were young. And on top of that, house prices are higher. So something's got to give. And so what they're looking for is a lower tax city, a lower house price city. And that's part of what's driving their movement away from the East. Number four, I'll talk about that at the end, but the recovery is going to be strong. I think it's going to be one of the strongest recoveries we've had in the USA. Connecticut will not be above average, though. We will be below average in that recovery, and we can talk about why. That was already there. We had not yet recovered from the previous recession. We thought we would have gone out in 2020 or 2021. We should have gotten a new peak. And then COVID came in and kind of kicked us back down. And right now, the current estimates are it'll probably be around 2030 before Connecticut regains the full number of in-state jobs that Connecticut had prior to the previous recession, not this recession. Now, strong price increase. If you look at this curve down there from the national, a couple of the national indices, man, the market as a whole, the national average and the 20 composite, prices just, look at the tip there, that curve came way up. Prices jumped quite a bit across the whole country. And in Connecticut, we were about average. We're about 14 something instead of 15, but we're awfully close to the national average in terms of our price strong. Oops, excuse me. Got to get this thing to do it somehow. Hang on. Okay. Oop, wrong direction. Okay. However, one thing we need to know, you need to admit somebody from the waiting room. Okay. Sorry. Came up on my screen. Now, what's really driving the prices is not all communities. And in a minute, I'll show you some data on Connecticut, et cetera. Upscale burbs are hot. This is one of the numbers that just came out from the realtors. If you look around the country, all these are kind of cities close to, smaller cities close to big cities. The suburbs are driving the market, okay? Oh, okay. Again, if you go outside, one of the hottest cities in the country that was just recently portrayed here, Manchester, New Hampshire, you all know it's not New Hampshire, it's Boston that's driving that market. And people are trying to get out of Boston. Boston prices are too high, it's too crowded. They're concerned about some of the schools. And so the burbs around Boston are very, very hot. What would be great for them, and I said this 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, they need high-speed rail that comes down to Worcester, for example. Worcester is a city that you could live in and have a nice home, a nice suburban community. And with high-speed rail, I'd make it above ground rail, elevated rail. You could get into Boston in about 35 minutes. You could be at the airport, say, in 45 minutes. But the people in Boston are worried that if they do that, their price increases will slow down. Yes, but that's good for the city, because right now their high prices are actually slowing down their growth a little bit. Let's look at New Haven. 2020 is a good example of one of the cities in the state. If you look at the index, back in 2013 is where we took that long hit down, and it's been kind of bouncing along the bottom, okay, until 2017, and then started to come back. And this year, it had a really good jump, about 15.6%. So that was slightly higher than the rest of the state, but a pretty good bump this year. Hang on a second. Okay, if we compare it to the USA, though, again, that was nominal numbers. If we compare it to the US, the green line's the US. The green line started coming back strongly in late 2012. New Haven didn't start to come back until 2017, and it's continued to lag behind. There's a little bit of jump right now in 2021, but we think that's going to level out and it's going to stay behind the country, just as Bridgeport is and Waterbury and Hartford. There's similar charts. I could have shown you Hartford instead of showing you New Haven, but they're awfully similar. If we took an example to help you get a feel for it, if we looked at New Haven against mid-sized cities like Nashville, Atlanta, Charlotte, not Chicago, not New York, you'll notice that the green line is the country, and then the orange and the dark green, which is black, and then the purple, those are Charlotte, those are Atlanta, and those Nashville. And then that yellow line at the bottom, that's New Haven. And again, Bridgeport looks the same, Hartford looks the same. So those core cities will hold Stanford off because they're doing better. But those three core cities in Connecticut have simply lagged behind the market. And right now, they've got a quick upturn that happened this last year, but do not anticipate that continuing. We think that's going to flatten out. Okay, now let me give you some of the texture though. A few weeks ago, because I gave this a similar program to the Appraisal Society for the state, and I looked at the condo prices in West Hartford. Now, the condo prices in West Hartford are only up about 4%. Now, single family residences are up nearly 20%, but the condo prices are only up. Now, I see this, except for Stanford, this seems to be consistent around the state. However, I want to point out to you, 36%, a little over 1 in 3 of those condos actually had lower prices year on year. So even though the market as a whole was up 4%, about a third of them were selling for less even during this period than they were a year ago. I then sampled Vernon Tolland to give us another look. Okay, their prices are only up about 2% on average in the condo market. However, 40%, 4 out of every 10 of them had price decreases year on year. So what you see in Connecticut is overall the market's coming up. Overall, we don't have enough inventory. However, there's a lot of spottiness, particularly when you look at the condo market. That condo market is up, but only about a third of what the residential market is. And there's a high volatility. Somewhere between 35 and 40% of those condos have year-on-year decreases, not increases. So the average number there is not a very good thing to look at. Okay, I told you one of the real problems, and I want to show you the national number here, is housing supply. We probably need 4 times the supply that we have. We don't need to double it. We need 4 times nationwide. And there's a problem there. Cities are not issuing permits, all right? And we're not forcing builders to build more houses. And what that's going to do is create more problems in the marketplace in terms of high prices. But now one of the problems you get into, if prices get a bit too high, citizens then become afraid that you're going to build new and lower their prices. So they lobby the government not to approve new subdivisions. This is a real problem in San Francisco. It's a problem in the Washington, D.C. area, and it's already a problem in the Boston area. And in some parts of Connecticut, it's a little bit of a problem because people are worried that supply. But without that supply, the real estate business is not going to do so well. Volume is going to continue to be down, and young people may be forced to go to other states. I'll give you a good example. We have a student who 3 years ago graduated from UConn, took a great job in Boston. Now, this year, because of COVID, they're going to be moving some of their people out of Boston. Some are going to go to Chicago, some are going to New York. They also have offices in Houston and Charlotte. The young man and his girlfriend, who's going to get married, made the choice to go to Charlotte. And I said to him, okay, why did you choose Charlotte? Not New York City with opportunity, not Chicago, not stay in Boston. He said, look, in Charlotte, we can be 15 to 18 minutes from my office downtown in a suburb. I can buy a new 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath house for $280,000 to $320,000. I cannot touch a condo in Boston for under $500,000, much less a single family house. And at that price in Charlotte, we've got some more money to live on. We might decide to have kids. So you're seeing a lot of people making that choice, that Nashville, outside of Atlanta, Houston, outside of Dallas, Charlotte, Raleigh are just better choices right now than a Boston, than a New York City, than a Chicago. All right, need more housing in markets that have young families and have singles so that they can afford to buy. Let's talk about COVID for a second. Look, here are the trends that, in my opinion, were in play before COVID. They're still in play. All COVID did was make them more intense. It didn't change one trend. First, more online commerce. Well, we were already talking about that. People are already buying from Amazon. They're already buying from Walmart. They're already buying from other people. And a lot of stores like Lord & Taylor's, they were already in trouble, and Sears had already died, and JCPenney's nearly dead, right? That's all because that market was changed. Now, this has gotten more intense. I'll show you the numbers in a few minutes. Second, more distribution infrastructure. Well, that was to support online. Now, here in Connecticut, we've had a lot of growth in infrastructure down near New York, and again, up near the airport in Hartford. There's been a huge amount of infrastructure. There's Amazon, there's all the others. A little bit more of that's going to occur, and it's going to slow down. The infrastructure is going to head more toward the south and the west. Let me give you a simple number. It will help you think about this. Right now, Connecticut, over the next 10 years, is forecasted to have 300,000 new jobs. Now, that is absolutely wonderful. Florida is forecasted to have 6 million new jobs. So if you're thinking about distribution in your Amazon, are you worried about 300,000 or are you worried about 6 million? If you're that guy who wants a franchise in, say, Domino's Pizza, are you thinking about rushing up to Connecticut to put in that new franchise, or are you heading to Florida because there's 6 million new families? So there's just some things like that that have really caught the news, for example, for Amazon or the chains. Number 3, alternative work settings. Look, there was already a lot of discussion. Do you have to be in New York? Do you have to be downtown Boston? The answer was no. The change was already coming, but now the change is coming faster. Okay, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Number 4, decline in the core city. This started in 1920 to 1940s and has continued. I'll give you some numbers in a minute, but it's phenomenal. For example, in Chicago, half of the corporate headquarters that were in Chicago in 1950 have already moved to the Burbs, all right? So people were already moving out of Chicago, out of New York. I'll give you more data in a few minutes. Distance medical care. This is the one that was there, but people weren't watching. In a minute, I'll talk to you about Texas, what some other places are doing. More and more of your medicine is going to come online, a phone call. You're going to go to a drugstore and take a test, and you're going to get your prescription right there before you leave, okay? Now, trends in medicine. One of the things I talked about is this change. Look, today, nearly all the big medical centers are moving out of the city. If you go down to the Washington, D.C. area, the biggest medical complex is Fairfax County Medical Hospital. It's bigger than George Washington and Georgetown's medical complexes together. They're outside the city. If we go out to Kansas City, 1920 up to 1950, all the big medical care was in Kansas City. Today, it's 35 miles out in Overland Park. Go out there and look. The medical center is phenomenally huge. The one in the city, yes, they're providing services to poor, the local clients, but it is not the growth area. It is not going to be the growth area. By the way, where did UConn and the state build their medical complex? It was not in Hartford. It was not New Haven, where I wanted it, near Yale. It was in Farmington, the Burb. Everybody across the country is putting the new medical centers. This started in the 1960s. It's 70s, 80s, 90s. It's not new. It's going to be stronger. Okay, more distance medical care. Let me tell you what's been happening in Texas. This started before the epidemic. Texas was so frustrated they could not get doctors to move to West Texas. Very rural area. And if you've been there, it's really spread out. What they have is a system now. You can go to the CVS there. You can get a blood test, you can get a saliva test, you get certain other tests. They then send that, in some cases electronically, to the Texas Medical Center, which is in Houston. The University of Texas Medical Center is outside of Houston, it's not in Austin, okay? That medical center then checks that and they can send back to the drugstore telling them what prescription to give you. They're cutting out the doctor because the doctors wouldn't go to West Texas. But as they get good at this, other medical providers are discovering, wait a minute, we don't have to bring you in for a checkup. We can just let you drop by our pharmacy. We can do the test. And in certain cases, we can give you penicillin. We can give you other medicine for that illness. And then we can check on you. Now, let's talk about Zoom. Zoom, the average doctor at the University of California Medical Center in San Francisco. My daughter is the CFO there, so I know this place well. Less than one Zoom visit a week by the typical doctor. They didn't want to talk to you on Zoom. They thought it was bad technology. They had to see you. They need to smell you. They need to touch you. They need to make you come into San Francisco. Now, 40% of all visits last week were with Zoom. And my daughter Beth will tell you, some of the doctors are saying, you know, this is not bad because on Wednesday morning, I can get up and do Zoom calls from my home before I go into afternoon calls at the hospital. All right. So the doctors are finally deciding that Zoom's not an enemy. Now, I don't know how it's all going to shake out, but I'm going to forecast for you there's going to be a lot more distance care in the future, and it's going to be part of your normal operation. And it's going to take medical care out of the cities, into the burbs, and onto your TV set. Okay, go back to online sales, just to give you some numbers. Sales went up 40% in 2020. They've been growing dramatically, but it was a 40% jump. Online sales as a percent of all sales went up to 21%. Now, here's the good news, bad news. The good news is we got to buy things during the epidemic. The bad news is this new form of retail is here to stay, and it's not going to stop at 21%. Within 5 or 6 years, 40% of your normal retail sales are going to be online, and at some point it may go above 50. That means a lot of shopping centers are not going to make it. They're going to have to be repurposed. Those of you in commercial real estate, get your hats on. There's some money to be made there. But the normal retail, we're not going to go back to it. 54.6% of all customers during the downturn use some form of direct sales on Zoom or through a television channel or through some other channel. That was a tremendous change, or now over 50% of the customers. 58% said they were comfortable with using online grocery purchases. 71% of the Gen X and millennials. Now, we old fogies, the baby boomers, we're behind at 44, but I'm going to tell you, I have a friend in Texas who retired 2 years ago at age 65. He has not gone to the grocery store during the whole epidemic. He's ordered everything from his the Whole Foods and Walmart, and he tells me he may not go to the grocery store again. He can just buy it all right there at home. So you're going to see grocery store shopping coming back because some of that's a consumption good. People like to go there and look at the bananas, the apples, et cetera, and spend some money and maybe even get a coffee when they're out, et cetera. But overall, retail sales online are going to go up dramatically, and even grocery store sales are going to go up online. The other thing to remember is the big players were the winners. By the way, since 1980, every 10-year period in America, 80 to 90, 90 to 2000, 2000 to 2010, 2010 to 2020, the top 100 largest firms in America took a larger share of the market. So we are becoming a company of really big dog retailers. It's not just Amazon and Walmart and Microsoft. In nearly every area of the country, the big dogs are taking the market share. YouTube revenue went from went up to 6.8 from 7.2. TikTok went from 17% penetration to 31. Facebook grew, Google grew. Social network advertising went up $49 billion. These are not millions, these are billions. Here's the one that grabs most people they're not thinking about, the sleeper in the crowd. Walmart delivery online sales went up 300%. The two big dogs are Amazon and Walmart. Now, I kind of personally prefer Walmart. I always check them both before I buy online. Why? Well, you know, if they send me something wrong at my condo in West Hartford, assuming it's not snowed this week, I get in my car and on the way to work, I stop by Walmart, I go to the customer service counter and I give them the thing I didn't want that was wrong. They immediately give me money back on my credit card and I leave. I don't have to package it. I don't have to mail it. I don't have to argue with Amazon that it was broken. I just walk it into Walmart and they smile and give me my money back. And a lot of people are like me. I don't want any hassles over returning things, packaging them, and all that crap. All right. 300%. Amazon was not up near that much. Okay. One of the sleepers. However, Best Buy, online sales up 105%, Target up 104%. Online is here to stay. It's going to grow. The two big dogs, Walmart and Amazon, are going to get a lot bigger. Distribution. In the East, we have a few more to build out from distribution center, but most of the new distribution money is going to be spent in the South and the West. The population is moving that way, and I'll show you. Active work or alternative work. Look, we're going to have less of outsourcing to Asia in terms of call centers. What all the surveys I see tell me is people don't like to talk to someone from India or from someone to Vietnam or Pakistan. They want to kind of think, hey, is that a Southern accent? Hey, are you from the Midwest? I know when I call State Farm, I get somebody out of Indianapolis and they sound like they're from Indianapolis. Now, when I call Schwab, I get someone out of Denver and they kind of sound like they're out of Denver. And generally they get what I ask them. We're moving away from the forum call center, but there is going to be more AI. When you first get on there, they're going to try to answer that question with a computer filter routine. If you're a Verizon, you know what I mean. You want to choke them because their AI doesn't work, but they think it works, so they keep trying to force it on me. Now, by the way, something you may have noticed over the last 5 years, when you get that service person from Delta, you get that service person from State Farm, you get that service person from Vanguard, they're nearly always today a college graduate. I always survey these people. Where'd you go to school? Where are you from? If I can talk them into it without being rude, I try to find out if they have a college degree. Why? Way too many people are going to college, not for the fun, not for the intellectual experience, but for the job. 40% of all college graduates the last 10 years took jobs that do not require a college degree. That's going to get higher unless we do something about it. And that's why that Delta, that State Farm, that Vanguard person who's talking to you has a college degree. There's simply not enough jobs. That's a problem in the marketplace. Now, we're going to have slightly more hoteling in cities like Atlanta and New York. That's because the firms are going to move their operations outside but they're going to keep a footprint there. There's a big hedge fund operation that was in New York City. They're now in Stanford. They've already bought a building. They're there. But they've kept a postage stamp presence in New York. So when someone comes in from Europe or someone comes in from Japan, they can meet them at JFK, take them to their office downtown New York, and work with them there so they don't have to take them to Connecticut. You're going to find more of that occurring. Okay. Core city. Offices are going to be leaving the core city. I'll give you some data on that. They're going to be moving to the burbs more and more. Remember, GE moved to Boston. That was 800 people. They kept over 4,000 people in the burbs of Connecticut. Now, we lost some jobs because they sold off their real estate. That was about 2,000 jobs that we lost. But the basic back office jobs are still here. They're not in Boston because those people don't want to be in the big city. You're going to get more work from home. However, there's going to be a rule. This hedge fund operator told his people in Stanford, you can work from home after the epidemic, but you have to be close enough that if I call you at 8 o'clock and tell you we have 11 o'clock meeting, or if I call you at 9 and say we have a lunch today, you have to be able to be at the office. So it's going to be flexible. That is, you can work from home a lot, but you need to be close enough. If I need you, you need to be here. Now, same thing is happening in San Francisco. San Francisco have told people you can work from home, but if you want to live in Denver, we're going to cut your pay. What Google and Apple have said is we may cut your pay up to 40% if you're not locally available. So if you want to be in Denver, that's okay with us, but that may be a 40% pay cut. I think you're going to see that with a lot of firms. They're going to say working from home is great, but availability is a requirement. And you're going to see more of that occur in the future. In the past, the hub used to be the city. Then you had little spokes out from it. What's going to happen is the hub's going to be outside the city. There will be spokes to other places. There will be a spoke back to the city, just like the hedge fund person in Stanford. This is what we're seeing, okay? Now, the move is to the south and the west and to the burbs, okay? Let me point out something to you that when I grew up in Tennessee in the 1950s, if you'd have told me this was going to come true, I told you you're nuts, okay? The South today has more population than all the Midwest and the East combined. It's already moved ahead both the Midwest and the East. By around 2050 to 2060, the South will be 1 out of every 2 people in America. 50% of America in most of your lifetimes, okay, is going to be living in the South. It's a phenomenal change, and it's not going to change unless something like the environment pushes them away. Just to look at the current numbers, 2019, the East is only 17% of the USA. The Midwest is about 20. The West Coast is 24 and growing. The South is 38. The South has 126 million people. No one else is close. And as I said, by around 2050 to 60, the South is going to be 50% of the USA. Now, just a reminder about what's growing. Now, we call it the L effect because it's Seattle down to San Diego across to the East Coast and up to Washington, D.C. This is recently when they looked at their key growth little cities, all of them are on what we call the L, down the West, across the South. None are in the Midwest or none in the East. You're going to hear this over and over the next 20 years. Now, there's been a decline in the core cities. There's a great book if you're from Connecticut. It's called City by Ray. Ray is a professor at Yale. And he explains to you that what killed New Haven was electricity and cars. And it's a beautiful story. I mean, it's sad, but it's beautiful. You got to read it. However, by 1940, most American core cities are dying. Now, here's what's occurred. The metro area has not died, but the core city has had trouble. There's only 4 real cities where the metro area has lost population: Detroit, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. Everywhere else, the metro areas continue to grow. Take Cincinnati. City's had some trouble, But the Cincinnati metro area is the largest metro area in Ohio. Let's take Hartford. Hartford's only about 10% of the metro area. The metro area has grown nearly every year since 1950. Hartford, every 10-year period, shrank since 1950. So it's the metro area now that's really strong. Same thing, Kansas City and other metro areas. So the trend to look for is metro area growth, core city shrink. Okay. As this is a nice article just recently from Insider Hook. Millennials are leaving the East Coast, and this one talks about them leaving both New York City and Chicago, and they're heading south. And that's exactly what's occurring. They're leaving New York City, they're leaving Chicago, really high cost and not enough jobs, and they're moving to Denver, Austin, Atlanta, etc. Now, let's talk about offices a second. Everybody keeps telling me offices are going to come back to New York. No, they're not. They've been leaving since 1940. They're not coming back. Cigna moved to Bloomfield. We were younger when that happened, folks. That's not recent, okay? Prudential moved to Jersey. Tyler, you weren't born yet when they did that. All right, let me tell you how long ago that was. And they're not moving back. And I have a great student who I placed there decades ago. He's already had 3 kids. They've grown up and go to college. Hey, Prudential moved out of New York a long time ago. Let's take California. Everybody tell me, ooh, they're all rushing back to the city. Apple's not in San Francisco. It's down the inland area. Google is not in San Francisco. They're nearly an hour drive out in traffic, okay? Microsoft in Seattle is not in Seattle. None of these big corporations since about 1970 have put their key operations in a city. They want to be near a city for certain reasons, including airports, but they do not want to be in the city. This is old, not new news. Okay. This core city decline could help Connecticut because we have some nice sized middle cities. Now, I'm not saying it will help Connecticut because we'd have to do the right thing to put ourselves in play. And we have not done that at this point. To get Connecticut to be a winner here, we must have what the young, talented people want. First, they want safety. And I'm going to apologize to you, but I don't see Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport as that safe right now. All right. I will say to you, for example, in West Hartford, I happen to know the data because I live there. We've had 1 unnatural death in the last 50 years. All right. I can take you to a bar in Hartford that averages nearly 1 unnatural death every quarter. All right. City tries to shut it down. They sue the city. They open it back up. Okay. People want safety. They want better schools. They want parks and they want bike lanes and they want good restaurants. If New Haven doesn't have those, and they're actually pretty good at this, if Bridgeport doesn't have them, if Hartford doesn't have that, and right now, if you're not near the convention center, tell me in Hartford where you can go to dinner after 6 o'clock, right? Because it's really good for lunch and there's a quick early crowd, but after that, it's like Manhattan, it's a desert. And by the way, Manhattan's a desert after 6 o'clock. And I have friends down there in corporations, so I know we eat somewhere else. We don't eat Manhattan for dinner. Now, a question. If these dense cities are so efficient, everybody's always telling me how efficient they are. Why don't they have money to put into good schools, inexpensive transportation, and free college and other training? When I was young, and I know that was a long time ago, okay? Some of you may be close to old as me. New York City, City U was free. Okay, San Francisco State in San Francisco and City U in LA were free, all right? They were kicking butt back then. You gave the citizens things they wanted. Now we decided everybody should pay for everything. Well, makes it hard. Transportation in New York City is really costly and it's kind of inconvenient too. Now, talk about the recovery. Here's one of the tricks, and I'll tell you a second one in just a minute. Upper middle class and middle class citizens did not lose their jobs during the pandemic. Restaurant workers did. Other kinds of workers that were manual laborers did. Some factory workers did. But upper middle class citizens tended to not lose their job, and they haven't spent any money. So it looks like in 2020-21, we have over $2 trillion of extra savings, not by the government, not by the corporations. This is just citizens like you and me. I know Bill counts for a lot of that because he's been putting it away, all right? $2 trillion in extra savings. My little mover thing is getting mad at me. How do I get that to move down? Hang on a second. Yes, okay, sorry, somehow I didn't want to click. Now, the recovery should be fast because there's excess savings, but something else, and I don't mean this to be negative, but as an economist, sometimes we economists get accused of being crazy, but we think of everything, or we try to, okay? Like a good appraiser, check everything. The pandemic primarily hit the elderly. If you look at who died, they're over 80 years of age. Then if you look at the next group who died, they're over 75. Now, what that did, it's going to be a huge cost savings to the medical care industry. The amount of money that we spend on the elderly is something like 4 times in their last 5 years what we spent the rest of their life. Well, this is kind of gruesome, but it's true. We're not going to spend that money on a lot of the elderly right now because they accidentally died during the pandemic. Secondly, I have a lot of friends whose parents died. You know, they inherited money earlier than they thought they were going to inherit that money. That money was coming in another 10 years, but no, it's here now. That inheritance money is not in the 2 trillion. So the amount of money that a whole bunch of players in America have right now is huge. On top of that, most of the states are in good fiscal shape. That is, they ended up having, California's going to end up with a surplus, not a deficit. 4 of the top IPOs worldwide were issued from California. That made a lot of people rich. They're going to pay high taxes. Those white collar workers did not get laid off. They're still paying high taxes. My daughter lives there. She tells me about those taxes. So the state has a surplus. Most states are in good shape, so they're not going to have to cut spending. They're not going to have to cut state employees. The surplus, the inheritance, the states are kicking butt. Recovery is going to be strong. Let's hope we don't have inflation. Now, here's the problem. If you are non-white collar, non-college educated jobs, recovery is going to be very slow. A lot of those restaurants that went out of business are never going to be restarted. Somebody else may start one, or the chains are taking more of the market share. If you go look, the chains like Pizza Hut, the chains like McDonald's, the chains, the coffee chains, they're getting more of the market. So fewer of those restaurants that were serving the market are going to come back. Some people estimate fewer than 1/2 of all the restaurants that went out of business will ever be operated again. Somehow it's not giving me the right click. Next. Okay, good. Let's do this again. Okay, to give you a little, some of the, look at the wage. If you were in the top 25% of the income group coming into the epidemic, 62% of them said they could work from home. However, if you're in the bottom 25% of the income group, only 9% of those people could work from home. Look, if you're the janitor at UConn, you can't work from home. But if you're me, I taught 3 classes last year, telecommuted, all right? My mom was sick, so I actually went to Tennessee to be with her, and I used my Wi-Fi to keep teaching my class because it's already online. I didn't have a choice. I couldn't be at school anyways. As a matter of fact, last year, I couldn't be at UConn without permission because I'm not an essential employee. Now, I kept teaching, but if you're at the hospital and you're one of the care people, you're going to have to be there. So if you look at this distribution, the lower income group is going to get hit hard by this. Now, before I wrap up, let me give you a little bit more data, then we'll wrap up and take questions. New York City, 1900. There were 120 key US and global headquarters. By 1990, there were fewer than 90. If we look, Glazer at Harvard tells us today, when he looked at the data, that less than 20% of the employment in the metro area is now in the core city. So only 1 in 5 jobs are in the core city. They're already moving out to the burbs. Big firms no longer start in the city: Google, Apple, Microsoft, etc. Another number that kind of blows your socks off. If we looked at the core city relative to the metro area, in 1900, 90% of all the people lived in the core city. Today, I looked it up last week, only 22% of the people in the metro areas live in the city. So we've gone from 90% living in the city down to 22%. That number is going to continue to decline. People don't like the city. No matter what people tell me, people are moving with their feet. Thibodeau said, what's great about America, people vote with their feet. They'll tell you, I love the city, they go to Stanford. They'll tell you, I love the city, they go to Glastonbury. All right. They'll tell you, I love the city, Nashville, they move to Franklin. All right. I already told you the medical centers are moving the burbs. That also happened in UConn. Now, let me give you the wrap up. Connecticut should have a good recovery, but it will not take us back to normal until around 2030. COVID did not change any major trend. People are moving to the burbs, they're moving to southern cities. That's because of space, price, and jobs. Offices and work outside the core cities is going to continue. Medical centers are moving out, and there will be more distance medical care. A cute little story. This is a Walmart kind of store in Shenzhen, China. Shenzhen, China, by the way, is like the 3rd most billionaires in the world today. And in 1920, it had 1970, it only had 20,000 people, but today it has 20 million people. That little robot, and there are other ones in the store, they tend to follow you around trying to sell you things. I find it to be a pain in the you know what, but the Chinese take it and they laugh about it. So it's good. But I will stop at this point and take questions or comments. I'll stop my share so I can see more of you, okay? And remember, you need to unmute if you want to make a comment. Or Bill, you've already unmuted. Good.
Good. Yes. Thank you, Professor. Question: they say, how Connecticut, not like I live for killing me, you know, Northeast Quiet Corner area. Yeah. How you compare with we talk about that as I also as EDC member for the town vice chair. What we look into the more housing, but the minimum wage in the warehouse working is no way you can afford $300,000 minimum.
Totally agree, Bill.
So yeah. what say town government or state government or see market trend, they say labor shortage. We always talk about labor shortage, but I always mention about housing. So what kind of housing we can look into that? Special. Another second question, they say that's about future plan. They say that infrastructure, say look like the city sewer, city water expansion. Without that, we always use as well and septic system. The pretty much is say the town of Killing is 40%, maybe 50% is sewer, but the surrounding town is not like quite corner is pretty much 70-80% is a septic system and well. So what we going to do with that? People moving in from I live in Hong Kong. I grew up in Hong Kong. I live in Boston and moved down here. So I never know about the septic system. I never thought about septic system before I moved to Connecticut. So another word is say that we know that all the data is yesterday and today is you use all the data in the past. What's the number? China is a grow fast, and you look like you talk about that. MOBA. Everything that's happening in the restaurant in China already. Right. And also we say the question is we have a much big difference. They say the speed train, whole naya. I attended the Norwich many years ago, talk about a train come to UConn area, from south to Boston to New Hampshire. More than 10 years, never happened. Nothing happened. What's going on about transportation? I think that our area need transportation. Connect to Worcester. Only probably 25 minutes I can go to Worcester. For 30 minutes I go to the 40 minutes go to Providence. I take me over an hour go to Hartford. So that's the transportation. So a lot of open area. So what do you think about the area? We need to do. Thank you.
Well, okay. Well, you have three things there, best I can tell. First one, I totally agree with you that with the warehouse employment and the other, look, what happened starting back in around 2000, a little bit before, depending on what year you want to start it, is we started losing jobs that were over $150,000. And we've continued to do that. For the last 10 years, we've lost jobs that pay over $150,000. Now, what we've replaced them with is jobs that pay between 50 and 80. Now, here's the problem. We are a high tax progressive income state. People who make 50 don't pay very much taxes in the state. People pay 100 and make 150 pay a lot of taxes. Here's the problem you get into. People who make 50 to 80 use more state services than do people who make 150. And let me just give you two examples.
Yeah.
If you make 150 or more, and my street in West Hartford, I think nearly everybody does. I don't think there's anybody who makes under 150 as a family, probably a bit more than that. However, on that street, half the kids go to private schools. And in my family, it was a half. My daughter went to the public school. That's where her friends wanted to go coming out of junior high, okay? She went to Hall, okay? And my son went to Northwest Catholic. And that was his choice again. He and his friends went there together, okay? So I'm right in the middle. I'm half private school and half public school. But that's typical. When we look at the families that make over $150,000 in Connecticut, a good proportion of them have children in private schools. Now that means you and me as regular taxpayers aren't paying their costs, okay? However, when I look at people who make 50,000, they're like 95% to 98% in the public schools. So even though that person, and I'm not criticizing the person, I'm just being an economist, even though that person now is not paying as much taxes, they're actually using more state resources. And let me give you a second example. When someone makes $150,000 in Connecticut, loses their job, they usually get another job even if they have to leave the state. But if a person making 50 loses their jobs, they go on unemployment benefits first and wait to see if they can get one in Connecticut. Now, I'm glad they're waiting, but from a state budget point of view, the person not paying as much taxes is twice hurting my state expenditure. So right now we have this imbalance. We're losing over 150 people and we're gaining 50 to 80. Now, at the same time, we do need to get them housing. And if they own a house rather than rent, they'll pay more taxes and they help to cover their costs. So I think the trick there is you have to get some of our counties or our municipalities to open up building. And they're all afraid of it. I have talked to many people in this state because I do public service from the center, and they're reluctant to build new housing, but that's what we need. Now, your second question about high-speed train. I don't think you're going to get high-speed train in Connecticut during my lifetime, okay? And by the way, let's be careful. In China, it's high, but it's not high speed. None of the real high-speed trains are operating as they were designed to operate because they weren't built quite well enough. Now, I love Hong Kong. I've been there probably 50 times. Shenzhen, nearly 50. For 12 years, I was the outside advisor to the city of Shenzhen on housing policy, okay? So, and I normally always come to Hong Kong. I don't fly into Shenzhen airport. And then, I go up near City U and take the light rail over to Shenzhen, if you know what I'm talking about, Bill. All right. So high speed's not coming here, though, not because we can't afford it. But I want to tell you a small story. Years ago, I used to live in McLean, Virginia. Okay, that's just outside of DC, the Burbs again. It's kind of the West Hartford of Washington, DC, if you know what I mean, okay? Now, we kept telling the government that outside the ring on the northwest side, we needed another bridge and highway from Maryland into Virginia and to bring all those damn New Yorkers to Florida around the city so they don't clog our traffic all the time. Now, I was told by a local politician once who took me to lunch, said, John, bridge will never be built in our lifetime. I said, okay, it's really needed. He said, well, it's needed by everybody from New York taken to Florida. It's needed from a job point of view, but Maryland doesn't want it. Because if you put that bridge out there, those people making pretty good incomes in Maryland are going to cross that bridge and they're going to buy a damn cheap house in Virginia, and Maryland's no longer going to get all the taxes or all the growth. Same story in Connecticut. Why do we not have high-speed rail to Hartford? New York City wants to make it hard to get out of the city. They want those workers stuck in the city. They want that money. They want that income. Every time they say, we love the idea, behind the scenes, they say, over our dead body. Connecticut's not getting damn good transportation because they don't want us to work in New York City and live in Connecticut or New Jersey. And I get it politically. You know, this is a hard thing. New York has to pay its costs and everything. So why should we be allowed to have a great job, take all that money in Connecticut? That's why we don't have the high-speed rail, okay? You're right on the sewers. It reminds me in Tennessee, I grew up on the farm. We all had septic tanks. I think so most of the growth in Connecticut will be in suburbs, Bloomfield kind of cities, West Hartford kind of cities, the suburbs of New Haven, the suburbs of Stamford. There we can put in city infrastructure, good water and good sewage. Now, the problem is that costs some tax dollars. And again, if you're only attracting $50,000 jobs, that makes it harder rather than attacking 150. Next person, I see some other hands up. Jump in there.
John, I have a question.
Yes.
Go
for it, Chris. I can hear you.
With the, do you foresee the trend to the suburbs either getting stemmed or even reversed with the advent of autonomous vehicle fleets, where particularly for the elderly, moving back into the cities where they're closer to shopping and restaurants, as you mentioned,
yeah,
or even medical. Do you see that happening at all?
Actually, I think electric cars and autonomous cars, when we get those working, will make it easier for you to live in the burbs. Let me tell you the way I tell this story when I teach a class. My mom, unfortunately, died just last year. But before that, she always had her house by herself after Dad had died. And she liked her, you know, she didn't want to move to one of the care facilities where she had her own apartment and there was buses to church and she just refused to do that, okay? I kept hoping to get an autonomous car because then Mom could just go out there, get in her car, hit her iPhone, tell it where it want to go, sit back, take me to the doctor, sit back, take me to my sister in Nashville. So if you get autonomous cars, the elderly are going to be less likely to move into the city than they are now. Now they move in because they're worried about being isolated. They're worried about being stuck. Whereas when I can just get in the car and tell it by the iPhone where I want to be, I doubt that I will move to the city. And by the way, all the data since about 1990 says the elderly are not moving to cities. Now, let me be careful. They're moving to Tampa, but that's not Atlanta, okay? They're moving to Fort Lauderdale outside in the burbs, but that's not Washington, D.C., right? So those kind of little suburban cities they're moving to, but elderly do not like to be in the big cities on average in America. That is LA, Chicago, New York. All the surveys I see say the elderly, they're a little bit afraid of it because they're afraid of crime. They're also afraid of complexity. I have to take a cab, or as my mom quit driving 5 years ago to Nashville because the traffic was too much for her, okay, where my sister lives. Whereas when you're in smaller towns, my neighbors who are 86 in West Hartford, he still drives downtown Hartford and has lunch, right? Now, I doubt if he were in LA or New York, he would do that. What do you guys, so, and by the way, when he gets out of that phone that hooks to the car, I know he's not moving into town. All right, next question. Great one though, Chris.
John, I have a question for you. When you were talking about the high-speed train is unlikely because New York City is saying over my dead body. Well, New York City has had Over My Dead Body during COVID. And a lot of New Yorkers are moving to Connecticut. So I don't know if there's more you can add about, isn't it true? Can't we assume that Connecticut has actually benefited from the influx of people moving and bringing that wealth to Connecticut? Can you speak a little bit about that?
I had a chart. I actually pulled today because I don't want to be too long. I had a chart of who moved out, and the group that moved out of New York City were the upper middle income group, and Connecticut was nearly, we were like the largest benefactor. And I think that's going to be true, but I think what's going to happen is they're going to be around the Stamford area. We had a program recently for some commercial realtors in Hartford, just a very small group. And I brought in one of my key students who works in Stamford. And what we did is look at who moved. He told them which firms moved out of New York to Stamford because he had the data. And then the question I had for him was, okay, they're coming to Stamford. Will they ride the train on up to Bridgeport? Now, the answer was not good for us. A few will is what he said.
Okay.
But the biggest group is coming to Greenwich and Stamford. And I think at some point, if we could get things worked out, they'll come around to Madison. I think you're going to see more coming around that area so they could live in Madison and they could be in New York City maybe one day a week. I see that coming, but I don't see New York voluntarily letting us have high-speed rail unless the federal government kind of twists their arm and bribe them somewhere else. You know, we'll give you B, you give us the, because I think we should have high-speed rail. By the way, I think this should be elevated. I don't want these trains coming through our little towns in Connecticut. I want them elevated the way they are in Singapore. Bill, you've probably been to Singapore and seen these, or in certain parts of China. I want them elevated. I want them to come out of the city, pop right up to Stamford, pop on up to New Haven, pop up to Hartford, go on up to Worcester, then into Boston. A good elevated rail with reasonably high speed, not the Japanese. We can't build things as well as they can. Okay, hold the speed. But you know, you could probably be in New York from Boston in an hour and 15 minutes with a good elevated high-speed train, okay? And that would just be phenomenal for all of us. It would help Boston, it help Worcester, but Boston's afraid it won't help them and New York's afraid it won't help them. So I get the static, okay? I get the static, okay? Yeah. By the way, Bill, Guangzhou doesn't like what Shenzhen has either, because I've worked with the Guangzhou government. So it's not an American thing. This is I want my city to win. If yours does, it's okay.
Professor, sooner or later, you know, the Shenzhen will become a province.
Yes.
Yeah, they
You understand. If you guys have never been to Shenzhen, you got to go to Shenzhen. It's a phenomenal place. The growth is unbelievable. Seafood, they're right there on the ocean. It was a fishing village in about 1970. Today, it's got like the 4th largest port in the world. Okay. On top of that, food, housing. They have Walmarts in Shenzhen. But in China, Walmarts are not for the poor. I could take to you one out near one of the government centers, and the condos that are around the Walmart are $5 million American. All right. So
no wonder they're all moving to Vancouver.
Well, some are moving to Vancouver. I agree. This is Shenzhen now, not Hong Kong. Hong Kong's moving. Shenzhen people not moving. Okay. Remember, I told you, 2nd largest number of billionaires in the world live in Shenzhen. This is Silicon Valley of China. Okay. They get treated very well. Okay.
Thank you so much, John.
I would like to say, Susie, people move to Vancouver and Toronto is much earlier than, you know, Shenzhen developing. Also from Hong Kong, and because British, you know, colony at the time, so you don't need a visa. You can stay there, you know, in school. That's a local, you know. So before 80, and also is before 80, 97. That's a two big movement to, you know, Vancouver. So that's afterward is now is from China. Yes.
Yeah. And it wasn't Shenzhen, it was more Hong Kong, as Bill said. Because remember, Shenzhen is the Silicon Valley of China. It's a phenomenal place if you haven't been there. Any more questions? Or are we okay?
I think we're good. I would like to share, though, before you leave, John, I was doing some statistics for Eastern Connecticut. And one of the things I was asked to produce, which I don't normally produce, is where are the sellers going and where are the buyers coming from? Because everybody has, been continually saying that people are leaving Connecticut. Well, there were 968 sales, single family home sales for the last quarter. And 12% of those we can't account for because the listing agent did not say where they went. But so if we adjust for that, the sample size is 856, and 661 of those people stayed in Connecticut. That's 77% of the sellers staying in Connecticut. The next top number was Florida at 32, almost 4%. Massachusetts came in at 2.57, Rhode Island at 2.2. North Carolina was the next one at 1.17. So the two Carolinas total 2%. So I just want to set the record that people are
Susan, I
not
will say
leaving Connecticut in droves.
Well, if you look at Connecticut as a whole, we're growing about 0.5% per year. That's what we've done the last 10 years. And we're not losing people. The worry though is we are losing over $150,000 jobs and we're gaining $50,000. Now that one,
That's interesting.
And if you work out the numbers before the downturn, that's nearly the deficit that the state had. Because the difference in what a $150,000 person pays or family and what that's, same woman might be making 50, those are different taxes and they're different services. And that's what worries me. Our population is not declining. Now, by the way, we're not growing like Florida or Texas or California, okay? And people keep telling you California is shrinking. No, California is so big, they're forcing people out. They're still growing, okay? They are the 5th largest GDP country in the world, okay? I mean, they're bigger than France in terms of GDP. So people get a little confused about the net numbers. But I agree with you, Susie. We're not shrinking. We're still growing. But I want to grow a little bit more on that over 150 and a little bit less on that under 50, okay?
Well, gee, it sure was a pleasure to have you at eCard today. Thank you so much for taking your time to be with us. And if we don't have any more questions, you can get on with your day, and I hope that we see you again. Thanks, John.
It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it. You guys have good.
Thank
Kim,
you.
nice to meet you from Arkansas.